It's great to have you. I suspect you are hot property at the moment, James. You've been splashed all over the press, both the internet and the broadsheet. You're on in the pages of some of Britain's largest newspapers, and this is following a public apology that you've received from the Metanoia Institute. You were studying a master's in psychotherapy with them 3 years ago, and you were expelled from that course. And the apology is in relation to that. So I don't end up rehashing your own personal background. Perhaps we can begin with how you ended up being featured in the Times, and this public apology was such a big deal.
Well, look, it's the culmination of 3+ years worth of litigation, which is kind of crazy when I think about it. I said in the Times interview that the process has aged me. I definitely have. I have literally aged in the time that's passed as well, and so it's a big relief to finally have closure on that. Going back to May 2021 when all of this kicked off, and I'd essentially spent the previous few months for the first time speaking out about my concerns with gender ideology, as I call it. I was pretty new to the game. There's a lot of people who've been speaking out about this stuff for far longer than I have. But from a therapeutic perspective, I was really quite concerned that we were essentially, I'm going to use strong language, like mutilating and sterilizing children for what is a mental health condition. And I thought, as a therapist in training, I simply cannot abide by this. And so I joined together with some other therapists who shared my concerns, and we started to speak out, and I wrote a petition to the government, and then the online attacks started coming, and the complaints, I think, to the institute I was studying at started kind of piling in. And literally one day out of nowhere, I received an email telling me I was expelled with immediate effect. And that then launched 3+ years worth of litigation. So it's been a big part of my life, and it essentially stopped my life plans in their tracks. And I don't know whether I will end up being able to go back into that vocation again. And it was a vocation that I loved very much, but I've tried to turn a positive from a negative and tried to use the platform that I've got now to kind of push back against this ideology and others that I think are prevalent in society.
Well, you've certainly built a big platform, James. You've got a couple of 100,000 followers on Twitter at this point, and I think you got something like 54 million views of a post for releasing the breaking news that the High Court had said that the decision to ban puberty blockers in the UK was lawful. 55 million views is crazy. I think 35 came in the first 24 hours. So you've certainly built a big platform. I suppose my question to you, as someone who's gone through that in those 3 years, is, was there ever a question that you were going to speak out and dissent against what you saw, or did you feel like you were compelled to do it because it felt like the right thing to do and you didn't think about the consequences?
I don't think it was ever in doubt, because, and I think this is a mixed blessing and a curse, but I feel very strongly wedded to my principles, and my core principles are around justice, and what is right and what is wrong. And so I can't seem to help myself when I see something that I think is unjust. I simply have to call it out, much to this displeasure at times maybe of some of my family members, but it's just something I have to do. But going back to your question, I didn't really give it too much thought, because I didn't think that what happened to me could ever possibly happen. It didn't even feature in my thinking at the time, because I, at that point, maybe I was naive back then, but I was operating under the assumption that adults can have mature, respectful conversations with one another, even if they fundamentally disagree. And, the places of study, for example, have a duty of care towards students and will treat their students with empathy and mutual respect. And these were kind of core beliefs that I had. So I never thought that this would happen. It didn't really seem like there was much risk as far as I was concerned, particularly because what I felt and what I still to this day believe I'm doing is for a public good. I mean, my sole motivation in speaking out was about protecting children. And that seems like a pretty good thing for anyone to do. Certainly when someone is raising child safeguarding concerns, they're the last people who should be shut down and cancelled. This is kind of a universal good, I thought, back then.
Yes, I think you have certainly suffered insofar as back then you had no public profile, whereas the likes of J.K. Rowling can, while she has rolled with some serious punches, she's quite uncancelable. But for the likes of you and I to try to raise something against the prevailing winds that we operate in, it comes with a lot of risk. One thing, though, that was gratifying from that apology, even though you had to go through 3 years of I'd imagine quite a lot of personal pain and suffering for having to fight the battle that you did. But that public apology was striking. And I don't know if you agree with this, but when I think about the public apologies that are issued for people who found to have been, something goes against them. So I don't want to put any words on this particular situation, but something goes against them, that something's ruled against them by their current employer, that employer's later found to be doing something not right. It's usually you'll get the boilerplate apology, which is, we're very sorry for any distress caused, wish them all the best for the future. And that might be about it, one paragraph. This was a very involved public apology. It felt like, it felt like there was some serious introspection on the behalf of the institution. And I suppose there were a few lines within that as well, which I suppose for those who are wondering whether to do something like dissent, as you did, is they green-lighted that it is okay to hold, it's valid to hold gender critical beliefs. Did you feel vindicated, properly vindicated from receiving an apology like that, or did you feel it was lacking?
No, I really did feel vindication. I thought the statement is extremely comprehensive, and it makes it clear that I was a good student, and essentially puts to bed this notion that I was failing, or I would have been chucked off anyway for some other reason. It kind of puts to bed that conspiracy theory that's been doing the rounds online. As you say, a lot of introspection, a lot of acknowledging the changing tide in terms of government policy, the CAS review, the last government's implementation of the Higher Education Freedom of Speech Act. So, I mean, a lot of people commented on this online. They said that it felt like it showed genuine contrition. So I was very pleased to see that. This is different to seeing through litigation all the way and getting a judgment in one's favor, and this is when anyone's involved in litigation, you're considering whether you're going to settle out of court. You do have to kind of consider these things and look, was there a piece of me? Is there still a piece of me that would have liked a judgment? I think so, because that can give you something that nothing else can. But at the same time, I feel that I've been vindicated, and that's all I ever wanted going into this. And more importantly, I wanted to make sure that this didn't happen to another student. And the statement that Messenoy have put out specifically says they will ensure this never happens again to another student. So, in that respect, my work is kind of done, and I do hope it sends a message to other institutes. But I think, I don't know, I would imagine that if if all of that happened back in 2021 was happening now, if I'd only just started to speak out about this in the same way, I don't think that it would have led to the same outcome, because I think institutes these days now are far more, thankfully, cautious about doing this, because they've seen litigation, successful litigations being brought by others. And I think they know that they're going to be at the receiving end of both, reputational damage in particular if they do this kind of thing. So I think the lay of the land is much safer now for students, or indeed employees, to speak out about their convictions.
Yeah, I think you're right. The Overton window has certainly shifted, and I certainly remember a few years ago, there was just no way that most people would even raise any dissent on this matter because of how quickly that would have been shut down and dealt with. And since then, there have been you and others like you who've ultimately had to blaze the trail for everyone else, but your experiences have ultimately left a space behind you. You've left this wake as you've been traveling across the sea for the first time, which people can get behind. And I think people can be thankful for that you would hope that people can start to dissent against these things, or at the very least, and perhaps we'll get onto this later, that institutes, organizations, and senior leadership of those will pause for thought before they head down that particular route of quashing dissent.